Here's a number that should bother you. So DataDream analysed millions of B2B customer journeys and found that 81% of the buying decision is already made before the prospect ever speaks to your sales team. And the average B2B customer journey is around 272 days from the first touch to them becoming a new client. So that's nearly 9 months. So your brand is either doing the work across those 272 days or it isn't. And if it isn't, your sales team is walking into those conversations where the decision has already been made by someone else. And that's what I want to talk about today. Not brand as in your logo or your color palette. A wise man once told me, brand is what your customers and your prospects say about you when you leave the room. So let's say you're sitting in a boardroom meeting with let's say all of your prospects, and you leave the room. What are they saying about you? I thought it was a really interesting one. Brand as a commercial infrastructure and how it facilitates you in growing your company to that next stage, especially from an online perspective. You know, in today's world, everyone is checking out your website, your socials before getting on a call with you, and especially before meeting you in the offline world. You rarely get to shake someone's hand these days before they've scoped you out online, not only your personal LinkedIn, but also your website. And the thing that's either building trust at scale is that brand. While you sleep, while you're working on other tasks, you can always have these hero assets working for you online. And there was a period at CSM 8 years ago where we were generating some really decent amount of leads from outbound. We had hired an outbound team, a business development team, and they were getting meetings booked into the calendar, which was great. Proposals were going out to these prospects, but we felt that the conversion rate on new business felt harder than it should have at that particular time. We were doing the right things commercially, but something was off. We were losing deals. And when we dug into the deals that we were losing, the pattern started to become quite clear. You see, in most cases, the prospects had already been speaking to 2 or 3 other service providers who they'd found through content, through LinkedIn, through their brand reputation, before we had even entered the picture. So we were being invited into competition that we were already behind on. And we hadn't built that online brand presence that would have put us on the shortlist before the buying process had even started. And that was a real shift for us. It was a bit of trial and error that we experienced that allowed us to make a huge change with the importance of building brand. We find that outbound, inbound, and nearbound work so much more effectively once you've started to invest in brand, especially on like dark social. We call dark social like all those social media platforms, you know, building really strong assets into the website. Video content is such an important one because B2B businesses think about pipeline as sort of sales and marketing execution problem. You know, we need to do more outbound, better sequences, more creative work on our ad campaigns, higher ad spend. And those things matter, of course they matter. But they're solving a downstream problem. The upstream problem, the one that actually determines who gets considered in the first place, is mostly determined by brand. So here's the question. What does your business look like to someone who's never heard of it or heard of you or the business, but is not trying to decide who to speak to? What do they find? What do their peers say about you? What proof exists that you're the real deal? What is your competitive advantage? What's your unfair advantage? And if the answer to those questions is not living online is quite thin, and people can't observe that online, well, then your outbound efforts are fighting very much an uphill battle every single time. And your inbound, if you're running paid media, is also going to struggle. So, over the last couple of years, we've been known for being an incredibly data-driven business. Everything that we do is based on data. And the data backs this up. Referral leads convert at around 26% in B2B. Cold outreach, as an example, converts at roughly 2%. That's not a marginal difference. That's, just a completely different spot entirely. And 85% of B2B buyers say peer recommendations and social proof directly influence their final buying decision. So your existing clients, your reputation and your content are doing more commercial work than most businesses give them credit for or invest in deliberately. Now, here's a really important distinction that I think most businesses miss when it comes to brand. There's two types of brand activity. Let me put this into a category. So let's say you're a scaling business, you're doing about 2 million turnover. You've got the company to where it is through grit, through hard work, through trial and error. And you're finally at a stage of scale. You're feeling like, okay, we're scaling now. We're starting to hire some senior leaders around the founder, the CEO, if you're listening to this, okay? And at this point, you recognize that your online brand is important. You say, okay, I think we need to invest in our online brand. There are two types of brand activity, and they work very differently. I think of them as intent and impulse. So intent is when someone is already looking for you, or they're already looking for a solution to their problem. So in most cases, people would Google this. But in recent times, with the introduction of all these AI tools, ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity, and the list is endless, they've now started to ask one of these LLM models. So they're actively searching for a solution to their problem. In this scenario, it's high conversion, lower cost, because the problem already exists in their mind. It's a shorter sales cycle. Then you've got impulse. Now, I'm not talking about, in the B2B world, impulse isn't like I see a pair of runners and they look lovely, so I'm going to buy the pair of runners, or I see jewelry and I'm going to buy the jewelry. That's true impulse. But let's just categorize this as impulse is where you have to interrupt them. You have to be creative. You have to catch their attention is the most important thing I can explain here. Because attention's a very scarce commodity right now. It's a very important one, but it's also very hard to get people's attention these days because our attention spans have got a lot lower. So visualize this. Your prospect is scrolling through LinkedIn and they're just scrolling down and they come across a video that you've created that interrupts them, catches their attention, talks about their pain point, leans into what's keeping them up at night, and then guides them through ways to solve for that particular problem that they're facing. So you're relying in this scenario on timing and luck rather than intent. And that's a much more expensive game to play initially than it would be on intent. I hope that makes sense. I hope I've explained that okay. And here's why it matters, because at any given moment, what we found is there's around 2% of your market who are ready to buy right now. Another 18% are in window shopping mode. So they're actively looking, they're bouncing from your website to one of your competitors. And then you've got 20%, with kind of no real buying intent at all. And, that's important to recognize. Then you've also got this other cohort of people that just aren't even there yet at all in their minds. So if you've got, really serious budget, of course, you can start to look at the market who's not in window shopping mode or is actively ready, that sort of 80% cohort. Of course, you can start to nurture them and bring them into your funnel and your newsletter and hold their hand. I think the best company I can give you an example of who does this really well is HubSpot. They played the long game brilliantly, but they've got a lot of investment. So if you're sort of a scaling business and money is a bit tight, cash flow is a bit tight, and you haven't yet built the infrastructure underneath your brand, I would say going after the 20% is a good option first. Get the revenue in, build those foundations, and then earn the right to play the long game. So what does that sort of foundational layer look like? Well, I think about it in a couple of layers. The first is proof. So when a buyer is deciding who makes their shortlist, the first thing they do is look for evidence. Have you done this before for someone else like me? So we're big on this. Like, we are very intentional about getting testimonials from our clients, case studies from our clients, because we always use the term in our company, let the customers do the selling for us. There's no real hard sell in our discovery process or our roadmap process. It's very factual. It's very focused on them. If they want to see that we've done this before, we're the highest reviewed agency in Ireland. So again, they can choose to read those testimonials and those case studies. So, this isn't about having just about having like a polished case study PDF, but it's about making sure that proof is very visible. It's very specific, and it's easy to find online where the buyer is looking. Be intentional about what part of the funnel you're showcasing the great work that you've done or the great product you have. The second is education. I think a lot of companies and businesses, especially in the B2B space, they hold back on this. People must pay for education. That's bullshit. That's just being lazy. You can offer value to your market. Your business is there to be of use to your market. So this is why we're shooting this podcast. We feel we can add some value to senior leaders who are trying to grow their business. So a podcast, a video series, frameworks, white papers, thought leadership pieces, so many options. And these are honest takes on hard problems within your industry that you've solved many times over. You don't have to give away everything, but you can certainly give away a lot of complementary information that allows you to build trust online. And the businesses that do this consistently, they're not just building search engine optimization value and getting ranked higher in Google and YouTube and AI, like on platforms like ChatGPT and Perplexity, they're showing up. That's massive for how you grow the company. It's a category shift that most businesses haven't even started to think yet. And the third layer that I would think about is transparency. So sharing your process, your people, what you actually believe in, your North Star, where you're headed as a business, and your values. This is one that a lot of businesses skip because it feels sort of like, why would they care? Or maybe it even feels a bit uncomfortable to share some of those things. But buyers aren't just evaluating your capability, they're evaluating whether they want to work with you. And in a market where everyone has polished websites, similar service claims, no authenticity, that we've found a lot of businesses, they just replicate what their competitors are doing. The businesses that let people see behind the curtain tend to stand out more, the behind the scenes. Now, here's something I see founders getting pulled into that I think is worth calling out. When they go down the brand route, they obviously get involved. Personal brand is known, especially on LinkedIn, to be a fantastic lead generator, and also a great way to build reputation and trust with your ideal customer. But they get sucked into mundane work, so approving posts, checking what competitors are doing, reacting to comments. It feels productive, it feels like brand building, but most of it doesn't compound. So this is really where we deploy a lot of systems for businesses where they can grow their brand in a compounding way, but not get sucked into the weeds of it. So if you're spending, 5 hours a week on that, which I find most founders are, once they realize the importance of brand, let's say that's 20 hours a month. If you value your time, you're going to put a rate on your time. Let's put a rate of €500 per hour on your time. You're racking up a pretty substantial bill there, €10,000 in a month on your own time, getting sucked into this. And you might say, I can commit to that for a couple of months, but it's far better off having the system to facilitate you with that, and really making a decision as to where are you needed. So if that's going in and shooting the podcast, being prepared, having someone preparing you for that podcast, you can just go in and get the job done. And all the pre and post editing is finished. If that's a video, your team is working on the scripts prior to you going in. So it's a massive weight that we're taking off the shoulders of a lot of our clients, is how are we facilitating them pre and post these high leverage assets that compound their brand, grow their brand to that next stage. And they don't have to be involved in everything, of course. There's a huge amount of brand work that doesn't necessarily need the input of the founder or some of the senior leaders. But thought leadership is an important part of it, because it showcases your belief system, the value that you can bring, and gets people excited about wanting to work with you. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to do after this episode. Search your business name on Google, not your homepage. Look at what comes up, what keywords you're ranking for. Look and see where your reviews are online. Are people talking about you online? Can you be intentional about that? Can you start to get some proof that exists online? And then ask yourself honestly, if you were a buyer seeing this for the first time, seeing your website for the first time, trying to decide whether to put your company on the shortlist, would you be doing enough right now? Is your online presence, is your brand presence enough right now? Because that search result, that collection of proof, that presence, that credibility, that's your brand doing the work without you in the room. It's what gets you in the room. It's what gets you the handshake. And if it's thin, that's a massive gap. So it's not more outbound, it's not more ad spend, it's the foundation underneath all of that. So I hope this episode was helpful. I will see you in the next one.